261 BCE, the soil of modern-day Odisha absorbed the blood of over 100,000 people. The Kalinga War left broken chariots and shattered weapons scattered across a devastated landscape. The commander responsible was the sitting Mauryan emperor, directing the strike against a neighboring state from within his own borders. This was the work of Ashoka the Great. To understand the man who would eventually become history's most famous royal pacifist, we have to look at the ruthless warrior who preceded him. Before he was remembered as a philosopher king, his contemporaries knew him as Ashoka, the Cruel. Mastering the history of the Mauryan Empire and the specific timeline tested in SSC exams requires investigating the end of this earlier violent persona. This was the scale of the Mauryan Empire. Founded by Ashoka's grandfather, Chandragupta Maurya, this centralized territory required a rigid administration to maintain order. When King Bindusara died, the throne was left vacant, but Ashoka was not the designated heir. He took power during a succession struggle. Historical accounts describe a campaign where Ashoka systematically eliminated rival princes, including his own brothers, to secure his position. By 269 BCE, Ashoka had successfully seized the crown, becoming the third Mauryan emperor. This ascent, built on conflict and the removal of rivals, set the stage for a psychological breaking point 8 years into his reign. That moment arrived in 261 BCE, when Ashoka launched a full-scale invasion of the independent state of Kalinga. The human cost was staggering. Over 1 lakh, or 100,000, people died in the conflict, a figure that remains a high-frequency data point for history exams. According to his own later inscriptions, Ashoka personally witnessed the displacement of families and the grief of the survivors. This proximity to the suffering triggered a profound crisis of conscience. The pride he had found in expansion turned into a deep public remorse that effectively ended his identity as a conqueror. The geography of this shift is preserved in the Dali Hills. Here, overlooking the plains where the slaughter occurred, monuments to peace now stand. Witnessing the Kalinga massacre led Ashoka to a pragmatic conclusion. Maintaining an empire of this size through constant violence was politically unsustainable. He sought a new method of imperial control. His solution was the adoption of a governing philosophy known as Dhamma. A common exam trap is to equate this with a simple religious conversion. In practice, Dhamma functioned as a civil moral code, a set of ethical standards for a diverse public that drew on Buddhist thought without being restricted to it. It operated as a public policy centered on ahimsa, or nonviolence, religious tolerance, and baseline social morality. He supported this philosophy with a comprehensive administrative restructuring. He funded the construction of roads and hospitals while appointing specialized officials, the Dhamma Mahamatras, to enforce these ethics across the provinces. Dhamma served as both a personal spiritual awakening and a calculated political tool. It allowed Ashoka to govern a population of millions without the recurring expense of military suppression. To preserve his new governing philosophy, Ashoka established what was essentially a sprawling network of stone-carved public communications. We can read his actual words on the rock edicts, messages carved directly into the landscape to reach the public. These edicts were recorded in the Prakrit language using the Brahmi script. These two details are essential to remember for the SSC General Awareness section. In addition to the rocks, Ashoka commissioned the pillar edicts. These were polished, freestanding monuments that projected his authority across the territory. The symbol of this reign is the lion capital. It merges traditional royal imagery with the Dharma chakra, the wheel of Dhamma. These stones provide a physical record of Ashoka's transition from a regional tyrant to a philosopher king. Ashoka's focus eventually moved beyond his own borders. He began acting as a missionary, exporting his ideology to other nations. He sponsored the Third Buddhist Council in his capital, Pataliputra, to organize and unify Buddhist teachings. He sent his children, Mahinda and Sangamita, on missions to Sri Lanka, successfully establishing a foundation for Buddhism there. Ashoka died in 232 BCE. Without his personal authority and centralized control, the vast Mauryan territory began to fracture and decline. Let's review the key data. 261 BCE, the Kalinga War. Dhamma Mahamatras, appointed for public welfare. Edicts, written in Prakrit and Brahmi. 232 BCE, the death of Ashoka. Ashoka the Great's reputation is not built on the wars he won, but on the violence he actively chose to end. He left behind an intellectual legacy that survived long after his empire fell.